Hey dude, my friends and I used to sneak into our high school at night. There was always this one door in the back that was just never locked, so it was real easy to jump the fence and just walk right in. We never did anything crazy illegal in there, though. We mostly just played hide and seek in the dark while enjoying the silence of a place that was never this quiet during the day. We visited the auditorium, the cafeteria, and most of the classrooms were also unlocked as well. I remember that was actually my favorite part. I took every chance that I had to just soak in the eeriness of our dark, quiet, and empty high school. I didn't know it at the time, but I was walking through a liminal space. Liminal spaces are one of those things that only feel obvious after somebody else points them out to you. But until then, you don't really have a name for what you're reacting to. Most people first encounter liminal spaces through pictures like these. You've probably seen these before: an empty school hallway, a dead mall, this hotel atrium. These places that are clearly made by people for people, but for some reason, nobody's there. And when you see these images, I'm willing to bet that your reaction is either one of two things. You either feel uneasy, almost to the point of anxiety, or you find them calming or comforting. And if some of these images make you feel both at the same time, you're not alone. I'll come back to that. But first, let's talk about what liminal spaces actually are, and how they got so popular and why they hit people so differently. The word liminal comes from a term that basically means threshold or transitory. The point is, it's not a destination at all, you know? Nobody's ever said, hey, let's go hang out at the weirdly empty gas station. You just end up there while you fill up your tank before you actually make it to your final destination. You wouldn't intentionally hang out in a hotel lobby, but you do have to walk through it in order to get to the pool. You get it. These places are just meant to be like the in-betweens. You pass through them without even thinking. But when you see them and they're emptier and darker than what you're used to, your brain starts to notice them in a way that it normally wouldn't. I mean, these images are sick. My favorite thing about pictures like these is that there's no people, there's no explanation for why the photo was taken, and there's no clear sense of when the photo was taken either. I'm in a group chat with some friends that I used to work with, people I haven't seen in over a year now, but we still share liminal spaces with each other when we come across them in the wild. There's just something about them. Liminal spaces don't actually need to be abandoned, though. I mean, a hotel hallway at 3 a.m. can feel just as strange as a mall that closed decades ago. The one thing that these two places have in common, though, is just the absence of people. Your brain expects somebody to be there, and that's probably where the discomfort comes in for a lot of people. We, as humans, we rely on environmental cues way more than we realize. Noise, movements, other people existing and walking around, anything, dude. Liminal spaces usually have none of those things. Some people experience that as unease, and, it's never because anything bad or scary is happening. It's just the fact that nothing is happening. School hallways aren't supposed to be silent, and malls aren't supposed to echo. But not everyone feels this unease, though. Some people, they actually feel the opposite. They look at the same images and they feel the sense of calm. They enjoy the lack of expectations and the social pressures. They simply see a space that exists without asking anything from them. And I think the difference in how people view these images usually comes down to how comfortable you are with uncertainty. If you're the kind of person that needs structure and clarity, then liminal spaces can just feel stressful. But if you're burnt out by noise and constant interactions, then these images can feel like a pause button for you. And I really like that two people can look at the same image and feel seemingly polar opposite emotions. I think that's dope. There's also something else that people don't talk about as much, and that is color. A lot of classic liminal images are surprisingly colorful. They have bright carpets, neon signs, painted walls, colorful playgrounds. Now, I know I said that there were only two emotions that most people feel when looking at these images, either unease or calm, but I lied. There's actually a third emotion that gets triggered when you stare at these for long enough, and that's nostalgia. The colors that I brought up just a second ago, they really stand out because so much of the modern world now doesn't look like that anymore. A lot of branding today leans incredibly safe and neutral, and everything is some shade of minimalist gray. It's all designed to be inoffensive, and it's just meant to blend in. When I look at older liminal spaces, especially the malls and the arcades and the schools, I see environments that weren't afraid to be colorful, you know? I mean, they were designed to feel inviting and fun, and sometimes a little weird, sometimes overly bright. But that contrast is what I really want to highlight here for you. For a lot of people like me and you, those colors are inherently tied to childhood memories. Seeing those bright and those loud places in photos like these, where they're completely empty and abandoned, it triggers a feeling of loss and longing, to be honest, making us crave a time when we used to run around with 15 other kids because it was somebody's birthday party. So when people say liminal spaces feel nostalgic, part of that nostalgia is just the visual. We grew up in environments that felt very intentional and playful, but now everything just feels efficient. It sucks, dude. Now, that doesn't mean modern design is bad. I mean, it is, but that's not my argument. It just serves a different purpose now. Clean and consistent design works well for screens and systems, but, I mean, be honest with ourselves, man. It never works well with memory. At least, not mine. And that's also why liminal spaces feel emotional even when nothing is happening in them. The pictures themselves don't really tell a story. Actually, that's far from it. Because of the lack of any context at all in these pictures, we often have no idea what was really happening when these photos were taken. But they still remind us of stories and times of our own memories when we were young enough to belong in a place like this during normal business operating hours. On a bigger level, liminal spaces represent transition. You know, it's the waiting period that we just have to go through before something gets to change. Everyone experiences those moments. We just don't like sitting in them. Humans crave answers and resolution, but liminal spaces give us none of that. They simply exist, sitting there, completely unresolved. The internet gave people a way to collectively notice that feeling together. Once the term liminal space entered the conversation shortly after COVID, people started recognizing it in photos and in games and even in dreams. That's also why these spaces show up so often in these horror-adjacent discussions without the need for monsters or threats. Dude, you don't have to add anything to these pictures. Just the uncertainty of it all does the work. In a world that's constantly way too loud and optimized, liminal spaces are really the only thing that aren't trying to hold your attention. I like these photos because they don't care if I stay. They're going to exist whether I'm aware of them or not. Liminal spaces reflect a world where things can just stop. Pause. Nothing can be explained, and you're just allowed to exist in the moment without having to perform. God, that feels amazing, probably. Liminal spaces can make you feel some unexplained combination of unease, calm, nostalgia, and I guess even loss, too. Some people don't like that, and I understand that. But for some other people, we can't stop going back to them. Because once you notice them, you start seeing them everywhere. That's all I got for now. I'll see you in another one.